Why is so hard to beat back the mainstream narrative in anything? I mean, it could be it doesn't matter, man. You know, evolution equals MC squared relativity. It doesn't matter. It's so hard to beat back the mainstream. And the reason is actually quite simple. Back in the old days of the IRA, they would say Maggie Thatcher needs to be right 100% of the time. Whereas the IRA was trying to assassinate her, just needed to be right once. That's it. Because if they were right one time, Maggie Thatcher's dead. If Maggie Thatcher was right 99 times out of 100, she's still dead. And they said they needed to be right just once, and Maggie Thatcher needed to be right every single time. And the same thing with the mainstream. The mainstream has a very defined narrative, very defined, very narrow and defined, all right? So the mainstream says, you know, freaking evolution is right. You name it about the coronavirus. It doesn't matter what the topic is. They have a defined, narrow approach to it. But the problem is there's a million other ways to challenge that. And yet we have different approaches in the people who disagree with the mainstream. I'll just give an example. So I like the good folks at Answers in Genesis. They have a good YouTube channel. I very much appreciate the work they do at the ICR, Institute for Creation Research and whatnot. Big fan. But Answers in Genesis posted a video how the James Webb Telescope proves the Big Bang isn't correct, the expanding universe and all this stuff. And they also have videos what this, that, and the other proves evolution isn't correct. And I agree with all that stuff. I got no qualm with it. But in this case, the James Webb Telescope proving the Big Bang doesn't is a lie, or at least suspect. We'll maybe say that a little bit more diplomatic. Well, I challenge the premise that the James Webb Telescope is legit to begin with. You see what I'm saying? I think if you look at the pictures of the James Webb Telescope, you're looking at nothing more than Photoshop or was it Paint, whatever the thing is, you know, Microsoft Paint, whatever it is. It's so freaking stupid, man. I don't agree with that at all. So I posted a comment on the Answers in Genesis thing challenging the Big Bang. I said, I can't believe people fall for the James Webb Telescope. And some guy posted back to me like, I can't believe ignorant people say their stuff on the internet. And, you know, ignorant again means, I don't know if this guy knows what it means. But here we are, probably in agreement about the Big Bang, about the creation narrative, certainly about evolution. And yet we're going to be at odds because we challenge the premise of why we are disagreeing with the narrative. You see what I'm saying? So there's a million different ways to disagree with the narrative, but there's only one narrative. So now you guys say, well, you don't believe in evolution, you don't believe in Big Bang. Why? And you say this, that, and the other. You go, well, that's not what people who agree with you think. They think that this, that, and the other. Like, yeah. Tom Cowan did a video the other day, Dr. Thomas Cowan, how the freedom movement, the anti-mandates, the anti-jabs and whatnot, are we're at odds in some regard because the question, even if vaccines exist, and Del Bigtree, for instance, doesn't want to take the momentum away from the challenge of the virus. Excuse me, if viruses exist, he doesn't want to get into that weeds. They just use this for an example because he thinks the momentum is on our side right now. Let's beat back the momentum of mandates, and then we can focus on if even viruses exist. And again, that's interesting. Because I don't know where I stand on this, frankly. My inclination is that viruses exist, but my inclination is not to mandate. Well, by my inclination, I'm 100% absolutely opposed to mandates to combat viruses, and I'm not quite there on that if viruses exist. I just don't know enough. I'm ignorant in that regard, and so I'm reading up on it. But anyway. But the problem is that you have people in the anti-mandate movement who are fighting amongst themselves while the narrative just marches on. And so Dr. Tom Cowan was saying, yeah, now I'm being told that I'm actually a puppet for the mandates because I disagree with the premise that the viruses exist to begin with. That's what he said. So you got a narrative that not only do the viruses exist, but we have to mandate jabs or else we're all going to die, essentially. But that's one narrative, and that's what the mainstream focuses on. So you have challenges to the narrative. There's a million different challenges. And then what happens is we divide and conquer. We split up amongst ourselves, say, oh man, Dr. Tom's crazy, thinks that viruses don't exist. You know, that guy's hurting our movement. And he's like, but do they exist? You see what I'm saying? Del Bigtree, and I'm a big fan of. He says, well, let's not get caught up in that right now. Let's fight back the mandates, then we can take this issue. And Dr. Tom's like, what? And, you know, rightly, he's like, look, if viruses don't exist, we need to just go to the crux of the matter of why we're pushing jabs. We're pushing jabs to fight back viruses, but if they don't exist, we should just go from there. Just go straight for the throat and say, no, these things are fraud. Now, I don't know if I agree with that, but that's why it's hard to challenge the mainstream, because all these different unique perspectives are all out there, and yet the mainstream is very straight and narrow. Not only do viruses exist, but we have to jab and mandate jabs or else we're all going to die. You see what I'm saying? Not only does Big Bang and evolution exist, but we're going to have to teach that in our schools, and we're not going to allow any questions to that. Because if you allow questions to that, which questions are you going to allow in? You're going to allow in the James Webb Telescope people? You see, I mean, it's amazing. It's easy to be part of the orthodox, and it's hard to challenge it. Because then not only do you have to beat back the orthodox, you got to beat back the various challenges as well, and find your own place in this. It's fun though. That's why for intellectually minded people who are not afraid to think, it's fun. It's a fun exercise because you like to hear all aspects. And a lot of people don't, though. They throw, and like I know for a fact I could fall for this myself, and I literally deliberately try not to, but I know for a fact I could. You know, what if I were wrong? What if the James Webb Telescope was true? You know what I'm saying? And it's because what you're always trying to do, you're always trying to find the evidence to confirm your thinking. That's confirmation bias. I will find the evidence to confirm my thinking. Matt McKinley at Quantum of Conscious YouTube channel says that on his channel all the time. He goes, look, any aspect of an argument, you can find evidence to support you. It doesn't matter. Any aspect of the argument, you can find evidence. Now the question is, are you going to be open-minded enough to see the other evidence against your argument is overwhelming relative to yours? That's a challenge, because you're like, man, look, because I'm inherently a contrarian, so I always want to find the contrarian to go what's going against the mainstream. But what if the mainstream's right? You see what I'm saying? And that's a challenge, man. I try, and I know I'm not very good at it, but I try to read both sides. Like, for instance, the doctors kill the third leading cause of deaths are medical the doctors in the hospitals and stuff. I actually don't believe that. I actually did research on this to some degree. There's a Johns Hopkins, and a lot of the truthers, which I would call myself, want to think, oh my goodness, don't ever go to the doctor because they're the third leading cause of death. And it's just, I mean, I can't say it's not true, but my research when looking at the Johns Hopkins study, if you even want to call it that led to that conclusion is that study has a lot of, it's suspect, man. It has a lot to be desired. So I don't believe that. So I'm on the orthodox in that regard. Says, no, I don't believe going to the doctor is potentially your third leading cause of death. I don't believe that. Now, with that said, we can look at other aspects that say going to the doctor could be when they're freaking promoting every single jab under the sun. You know, like freaking drug pushers, man. It's crazy. But in terms of going, you know, the doctors and the hospitals are the third leading cause of death, I don't buy that. Because I think the evidence, and then kind of going back to aspartame and stuff like that too. A lot of the truthers start saying aspartame is you know, bad, blah, blah, blah. I'm not sure I believe that either, because there's enough evidence on the other side to say it's not nearly as bad as what they say. However, I'm open in that regard. So, yeah, that's why it's tough to challenge the orthodox, because the orthodox has a straight and narrow. The contrarians are all over the place. Well, that's what makes it fun. All right, we'll see you.